Hello and welcome to Personal Development Podcasts. Normally these are for our students and they're things we share either on our Personal Development VLE website, or they are podcasts that we run either as assemblies or as form times, helping understand the world for our students, helping them to be aware of themselves, others around them, and things that are happening in the world. The aim of them really is to help equip our young people for the world today and to help prepare them for the world of tomorrow. This is a little different because normally they're aimed at your children. This time it's kind of aimed at supporting you. And our hope is that with this podcast, we'll be able to raise awareness of what we actually teach in relationships and sex within Presnell. Also show you how it's taught and some of the principles that we hold as important. I'm also hoping that you will see plenty of ways to support your child in their learning through relationships and sex education, and also to encourage any thoughts or questions you may have. On the final slide, I will show you my email address, and I would really encourage you, if you have any questions or thoughts about what we're teaching, or any thoughts or questions about how we can help you support your child through their learning in what is a really challenging and sensitive area. We'd really like to help, and please do not hesitate to get in contact with me. I will clarify anything you need clarifying. I will try and help support in any way I can. Okay, so sex and relationships, not always the easiest topic for us to talk about, and there have been a lot of changes over time with the relationships and sex education that is provided in school. I can guarantee you that the experience you had of sex and relationships at school is very, very different from the ones that students have now. And in terms of the law, very little was said in terms of what needed to be covered within relationships and sex education, but that has changed dramatically. There is now a statutory curriculum of what must be taught, enshrined in law, and it is detailed about the topics that should be addressed, both in Key Stage 3, that's years 7, 8 and 9, and Key Stage 4 with year 10 and 11. I thought it would be helpful maybe for us to consider what good sex and relationships should look like. So these are things that we aim to model within our classes and within our teaching. Good relationships and sex education should actually give young people accurate information that helps them develop healthy and nurturing relationships. And what's really important about this is this isn't just about intimate relationships, but actually it's about all types of relationships. Relationships are so crucial to a successful life, to a happy life. And so we encourage exploring what good relationships look like, what healthy relationships look like. We want students to understand what a positive relationship looks like. And that may be things such as relationships with friends or colleagues, parents, and future partners. But also we try to model as well good relationships in a learning environment by being positive with our students and encouraging and making them feel comfortable in the classroom and affirmed in the classroom as well. We look at the positive relationships, but also in contrast as well, we look at signs of unhealthy relationships or toxic relationships as well. And we encourage students to be able to recognize that and to evaluate their own personal relationships and to see how healthy they are and how they can improve the health of their relationships. One area that is absolutely vital that we teach is the issue of consent. This has been never more important than now, so that students understand the idea of consent in all types of relationship, in friendships, family, and so on, but also in relationships and intimate relationships. So they understand that they are in charge of their bodies, they are in charge of the decisions that they make. Nobody has the right to pressure them, nobody has the right to coerce them. They have that autonomy, and no means no, and that a yes should be clear and affirmed. And we talk to students about how to ask for consent and how to give consent effectively. Again, always reinforcing the positive side of that and the benefits of really good consent in all types of relationship. Good relationships and sex education does not, I cannot stress this enough, does not encourage earlier experimentation in any way, shape or form. Government research shows that informed young people are actually more likely to delay experimentation, more likely to delay sexual activity, more likely to inform consent, and far more likely to report if somebody does not respect their consent. So it serves as such an important feature in terms of the safeguarding and well-being of your children, but also to make sure that they make decisions at the time that is right for them, at the time when they feel comfortable. And almost inevitably, we teach this without judgment, but almost inevitably that means that because students are informed about consent and about sexual activity, they make those wiser decisions that we would hope and expect that they would. Good relationships and sex education also helps young people mature. And they mature in several ways. They mature in terms of the knowledge that they get. And I have to say, they are so focused in relationships and sex education classes. We rarely have behavior issues within those lessons because students really do appreciate how important this is for them now in the context of their friendships and the relationships that they have now, but also in the context of what future relationships will look like as well. Good relationships and sex education is all about respect, and it helps young people respect themselves, respect other people, and show respect through things like consent. We aim to build confidence and self-esteem. Students aren't made to feel uncomfortable or put on the spot. They are encouraged to contribute, and their contributions are honoured and respected. Good relationships and sex education as well helps young people understand human sexuality. This has not been traditionally an easy area for adults to consider, let alone students. But it is such an important aspect of who we are. Within science, of course, they teach about the biology of reproduction, but sex and relationships is far more than just the biology of things. It's the feelings, it's the emotions, it's all the stuff that goes with that. It's about the mental health and well-being, not just the physical health and well-being. We seek to support the development of safe and fulfilling, healthy, intimate relationships, and this bit's really important, at the appropriate time, so that students can understand what is an appropriate relationship for their age and when they are ready for a further relationship as well. Again, those three principles on the side there are really important. The idea of what we teach being age appropriate, that what we teach should be affirming for students themselves and to show affirmation of other students, their peers within the class, and that the information we give is accurate and clear so students can make informed decisions and give informed, confident consent. So how do we teach relationships and sex education at Priestnall? Well, first and foremost, teaching of relationships and sex is non-judgmental. We do not judge different perspectives and different viewpoints to relationships and sex education. We respect that there are many different thoughts and many different approaches when we're talking about the issue. Often there may be an issue where we discuss faith in terms of relationships and sex. We teach secular views on relationships and sex, but we also take faith perspectives in as well, considering their viewpoints, considering the benefits and challenges that those viewpoints might take. We work hard to make sure that the information is up to date, that it is accurate, and that it is clearly factual as well. So there are so many sources of information for young people today. Your children have access to a fabulous resource in terms of the internet and the World Wide Web, a fabulous resource in terms of social media. One of the challenges, however, is making sure that that source of information is accurate, balanced, and positive. And we make sure within our classroom that the information is always accurate, always balanced, and always positive. So teachers within my department receive specific relationships and sex education. I myself have received considerable relationships and sex education training. I have completed a master's level unit on relationships and sex education. I support my team, and on occasion I lecture for Manchester Metropolitan University for the student teachers there, supporting them and equipping them to be able to teach positive and effective relationship sex education as well. We have a lot of expertise within our department, and we seek to make sure that everybody who teaches it is talking to each other and supports each other. And, we work effectively as a team within this with a strong knowledge base and strong skills in being able to support good RSE learning. Every lesson that we have, which is relationships and sex education, we reiterate what our expectations are for these lessons. You would expect that we would seek an awful lot of maturity when we're dealing with such sensitive topics. And students, more often than not, show a really high level of maturity in these lessons. We encourage respect for the learning environment, for teachers and students, and we encourage people to respect each other, but not only respect each other, but respect themselves as well. We encourage that people are willing to listen and consider different points of view without judgment, but considering those points of view and taking them into consideration with their own points of view. At no point do we seek to change someone's view. We offer information non-judgmentally to help people have informed viewpoints and decisions. We encourage the fact that there is no personal information shared within the lesson. That's a really important aspect of things. We never talk about students' personal situations or information. We talk about scenarios or situations around that, or we use other examples that are available to us, but we do not talk about personal information. We protect the rights and the privacy of students within that. And we also point out the importance teachers have with a duty to safeguarding. So we always make students aware of the fact that they should respect each other's confidentiality within the lessons, and that teachers will respect their confidentiality, but also have a duty to keep them safe. That's physically, emotionally, and psychologically. So students are aware of what we are expected to report as part of our safeguarding duty that is a requirement of every single teacher. As you would expect within this subject, we can often have a situation where students may actually take the opportunity to disclose something to us, but they understand clearly what we have to do with that, how we pass that on, and how we show respect to them in handling that. Teachers also use distancing techniques, so we encourage the movement away from personal information and personal views to sort of non-personal perspectives. So we're likely to talk about things like, so suppose someone was in a relationship and they were dealing with this situation. How do you think they would handle it? And we keep ideas within the hypothetical rather than turning it into personal situations. We have a lot of fictional case studies. Occasionally there are real-life case studies that come to mind from the media, but more often than not, we have scenarios where everybody is completely fictional within that, and students can wrestle with the ideas without that personal engagement. Our teachers, as I say, are informed and keep really up to date with the most important aspects of relationships and sex education. We're constantly seeking to better our relationships and sex education teaching and to provide the most accurate, most informed education that we can in the best way that meets the needs of your children. Our teachers are supportive and affirming when we're dealing with these things, often with students coming into particularly Year 7, where this is pretty much a new encounter in many ways. There may be a little bit of nervousness, and we seek to put students at ease. And it's remarkable how quickly they can become comfortable and how mature they are in talking about serious, important matters relating to relationship. When we are talking about relationships, we seek to engage head knowledge and heart knowledge. So the head knowledge is fact. We seek to give informed, accurate information. The heart knowledge is helping students understand not just what they think about something, but how they feel about it. How do they feel about these issues? How do they feel about puberty? How do they feel about relationships? How do they feel about their identity and the identity of other people as well? So we encourage emotional well-being, empathy, and tolerance too. If you want to find out more about some of the evidence-based information about relationships and sex education and the positive impact it has, and dispelling some of the myths about sex and relationships education that may have carried on for a long while, the Sex Education Forum have gathered together in one document the evidence that has been gathered through a significant amount of research into how effective relationships and sex education can work. I would encourage you, if you're interested, to go and have a look at that. It's really informative and also really affirming of what happens within relationships and sex education lessons. So, the wonders of modern technology. There we go. So, what do young people learn about in relationships and sex education? Well, I'm hoping at some point to do this as a live session so that I get to have the opportunity to talk to you as parents, either face-to-face or through a Teams meeting. And when we do that, I definitely want people to be able to reflect on these two questions. But I'd encourage you actually just to take a few minutes to think about this. And if you're with your partner, perhaps you can both sit and have a little chat about it. Feel free to pause the video and just ask yourself these questions. I think it might be quite interesting, actually, as a discussion to sort of see what your perspective is and consider how that might be different from your child's. So looking back, what do you wish you'd learned about in relationships and sex education in school? As adults, we look back and think, well, what do I really wish was included in my education? So what do you think? What do you think we should absolutely include in relationships and sex education? I'd like you to have a little think about that. If you need to, feel free to pause the video, take a moment to either reflect by yourself or talk to your partner, and just restart it whenever you wish. I'll be kind of loitering around on the pause button. Okay. Hopefully you had some interesting discussion and conversation about that. Hopefully it was thought-provoking and made you think about how different, really, our world is today from where it was. I'm going to walk through what we teach at Preston. We've spent a lot of time and effort making sure that what we actually teach covers comprehensively the requirements of the law in terms of what topics and what subjects we have to address. So in Year 7, if your child is in Year 7, this is what they've been learning so far this year. So the first topic we address is what is consent? And we think about different forms of consent for all sorts of stuff and how important it is, and the fact that as human beings and even as children, they have a right to consent. We consider some of the things that are used as pressures on consent, and we recognize, when we're concerned about consent and what happens if people breach our consent. This is a really important section because we actually look at how to report it when somebody doesn't respect consent and someone breaks that consent. Another topic we do is, why do I have to grow up? And we have to consider puberty, and this is the place where we look at that. We look at puberty, and we teach about menstruation, and also we consider how that affects people as an individual, how it might affect other people, family and friendships. What's really interesting is we do teach in mixed gender classes, which I think is really important. I think it's important for girls to understand puberty, for understanding their own body, but for all of the genders as well to understand that, to, the importance of relationships, to have a perspective of how somebody else may be feeling, what somebody else may be experiencing is so important. So we consider that as well. We also, it's sad but necessary, we have to help equip our students protect themselves, both online and in real life, from child sexual exploitation, and recognize the signs of online grooming and other aspects where they may be putting themselves in risk. Risk awareness and risk management is a really important aspect of relationships and sex education, and it's one we encourage students to really give thought and consideration to. We also look at why do I feel like this, and we recognize the fact that with puberty, this might affect self-esteem and body image. The fact that everybody develops, in their own way. We are all unique. We consider our sexualities and our gender identities, and we also recognize the importance of the Equality Act and how people's identity, sexuality, and uniqueness is protected by the law. We also look at why relationships matter, and we'll explore a lot of different types of relationships within this. We explore friendships, family, pretty much all the different types of relationships, but we look again at those differences between what is a positive relationship, what is a toxic relationship, some strategies to manage relationships to ensure that they either remain healthy, or if they are toxic, how to move away from those toxic relationships. And we encourage them to seek help and guidance. There are plenty of great resources for young people to seek out, and we highlight those for students to be aware of. If your child is in year 8, we cover a different range of topics. The aim right the way through all the year groups is to build on the knowledge and understanding that has been established in previous year groups. So you'll see with this first topic, we're straight back into consent, and we reinforce why consent is so important. We think about different methods of giving consent, different forms of consent in relationship and in real life, and also we begin to emphasize the importance of consent in the area of intimacy. We also do a module on why relationships are so intense, and this is really, really important. We think about different relationships, and we really focus on the benefit and the risks as well to mental health and well-being that relationships can bring. We talk about the intensity of emotional experience during puberty, during relationships that change, and during situations where there may be an element of grief, such as divorce or bereavement, and how we can encourage managing some of these intensive emotions. Again, with what makes relationships good, we reinforce the benefits of healthy relationships. We look at things like attraction, intimacy, friendship and companionship, mutual support. And it's important to recognize that there are different forms of relationships and different benefits of them. When we talk about intimate relationships, we can easily think about sexual relationships, and that is part of many of those relationships. But sometimes intimate relationships are just about being close to someone and knowing that we can be vulnerable with them and we can trust ourselves entirely in that situation. And that is as vitally important as when we're thinking about sexual activity. If your child is in year 9, this is what they've been looking at this year. So they've been looking at how we manage relationships and the importance of mutual respect in all different aspects of relationships. We look at the importance of clear communication, negotiation in relationship. How can you talk about different expectations in relationships while still respecting each person's individual consent? And we talk about the benefits of mutual support in a relationship. Again, we emphasize the issue of consent, such an important issue, and we explore more significantly as students get older. We're able to take a more direct approach because of age-appropriate understanding, and we begin to think about how to resist peer pressure, how to resist social influence, whether that's in real life or online, and how to make sure that their consent and the right to consent is upheld. We also think a lot more about intimacy, different forms of intimacy in real relationships, how relationships and intimacy are presented in the media. And the media and social media are such an influence on young people. It's so important to address this. Here is also where we begin to consider the impact of pornography on relationships and physical health as well. So we begin to address some of the more sensitive issues As I say, the internet is such a great resource. It gives students and young people access to incredible sources of knowledge and information and support. But there are also risks and cautions to be taken with that. And with the benefits of the internet are also some of the challenges of the internet, not least pornography. So we teach students about the history of pornography. We teach about its physical effects on an individual, its emotional effects on an individual, and also how it may affect relationships. Again, we consider healthy relationships. We reinforce the learning that's taking place. We consider long-term forms of relationships, so marriage, civil partnerships, cohabitation, just long-term relationships in general. Those are taught equally and affirmed without bias. We also begin to address more serious issues such as domestic abuse, the signs and the different forms of domestic abuse, and where to seek help if we see signs of abuse in other people, or if we ourselves are in an abusive relationship. We also encounter the topics of parenthood and sexually transmitted infections as sometimes a purpose of sexual activity, sometimes as an unintended consequence of sexual activity. And so we look at the importance of different forms of contraception, their benefits, partly to avoiding unplanned parenthood, but also in preventing sexually transmitted infections. We also look at mental health and well-being. This is kind of in a general topic, but again, the issue of relationships is always present whenever we're looking at mental health and well-being as well. If your students happen to be in year 10, that the topics they cover become more significant and more deep-reaching, and we address them at a deeper level because students are more able to understand what is going on in those aspects. So the first topic we do is what is love? And we look at all the different types of forms of love. We look at Greek words for love and the different connotations of those. We also evaluate different forms of intimacy, highlight the importance of consent, absolutely again. We consider it in all different aspects of life, including sexual relationships. We also address the issue of equality, and we address the issue of sexual harassment and sexual violence, appropriate behaviors and inappropriate behaviors, and how to respond in those situations as well, so that we can affirm students' right to be respected, affirm students' right to consent and their rights over their body, and affirm how they can act to do something about that. We consider why sexual health is important, so we look at general health and also health in terms of healthy relationships, sexual health. We consider the risk involved in sexual activities, how we take risks, and don't forget some risks are positive, as well as the negative risks that we may consider, and how to manage or limit those risks. So, for instance, the effects of alcohol on risk in terms of sexual activity, the effects of peer pressure on sexual activity. We think about substances and situations which may affect students' abilities to make decisions. We think about, again, different forms of contraception to reinforce what we've taught in Year 9. And we think about the nature and the impact of sexual transmitted infections, not just the symptoms, but actually what effect does that have on the individual's life and the life of those around. Again, we point to accurate and effective support and advice to affirm students in their relationships and sex education. We also consider, again, when relationships go wrong, considering toxic relationships, how to end relationships amicably, which I think is a really important and valuable lesson for real life. Different reasons for relationship breakdown, reconciliation and restoration of relationships, and different positive approaches we can take to differences in relationships and challenges that relationships may face. With year 11, apologies for that, with year 11, we have a limited amount of time in which we are able to share with them. Often students are getting near exam season, means that the teaching time we have for year 11 is less. But the first topic we do within Year 11, just to reinforce things, is how the law handles consent. So we look very specifically at consent in the law. We consider the situation in the UK in terms of sexual harassment and sexual violence. We look at consent in terms of sex and intimacy. We also look at consent in terms of our data and GDPR, how our data is part of our possession and how people seek our data. One of the things I always ask students to do is put your hands up if you've ever downloaded an app and not read the end user license agreement and not actually looked what permissions you are granting consent to when you download an app. I wonder what answer I would get if I asked that of you as parents. Have you ever downloaded an app and just ticked agree at the bottom of that? Guilty as charged for me, I can tell you that much. So that's for Year 11. Okay, I'm hoping this bit will help give you confidence in supporting your child in terms of sex and relationships. A few years ago, I did some research with students and a large group of students, actually. And within that research, I discovered that 40% of students, after having relationships for sex education, would be happy to talk to their parents and had initiated a conversation with their parents about sex and relationships. Rather interestingly, in the same research, the feedback was only 20% of parents had initiated a conversation about sex and relationships. And some of the feedback from students was they felt particularly awkward about that at times. And in many cases, their parents clearly felt awkward about that. I think one of the benefits of what we are teaching students now, of what we are teaching your children, is that when they are adults and they have their children, because we're teaching them to be confident in this subject, hopefully they will be confident in sharing with their children and giving them accurate, informed, non-judgmental information with which they can make decisions. So some key advice. Things I think may well help you if you're having to have those conversations. They are absolutely important conversations, and the role of parents in sex and relationships is so crucial. So here we go. The important thing is to recognize. We've got to recognize it's not always easy for young people to talk about this. And actually, do you know what? Being really honest, it's not always easy for parents to talk about relationships and sex either. It's a challenging subject. It's important as well that we show respect. The world, I've got to say, is really different from the one we grew up in. Schools have changed dramatically. I've found myself saying to my own daughter at various points, well, when I was in school, well, do you know what? When I was in school, school was a very different place. And we need to recognize that, and we need to respect that. We also need to respect that our children are like us in many ways, but they are unique. They are individuals. They have different emotions, feelings, and experiences. And while we may have a perspective on why our children are feeling that way, you know, their perspective is really important. And as I said, the world's a different place, and that affects how people feel in a very different way. We didn't have to deal with the social, emotional, and relationship pressures that the internet and social media provide. These are new challenges that a new generation face. It's really important that you respect that your understanding may be different from your child's. And we also need to respect that we're all learning, and that's fine. We don't have to be experts in everything. It's okay to say, I'm not sure about that, or, I don't know. It's okay to say to your children, do you know what? I'm not sure, but I'm going to find out. And that's something we would encourage. We ask students, if you don't know something, ask the questions. We want you to find out. We want you to learn. And you can model that in such an effective way for your children to demonstrate, hey, I don't know something. That's okay. But I can find out. So we're all learning. Let's face it, we're all learning about relationships from the day we're born to the day we die. And they are so crucial, those lessons. We can share the wisdom and experience we have gained over time. And I think that's a really important thing, that we show respect about where our young people are, and we're able to support them on their individual journey. Reactions are really important. How a parent reacts will affect how willing a child is to talk about relationships and sex. And they may actually lead with something that's close to the subject that they actually want to talk about, but not directly it. It's almost kind of testing the waters, if you like. And it's really important to think about your response to that. Your verbal response, but also your body language and your facial expression, because that can really affect how comfortable they feel raising questions or concerns or issues with you. Another thing is, it's really powerful to ask questions, sometimes way more powerful to ask questions than it is necessarily give answers. So I'd encourage you to ask questions. Things like, well, what do you think is the right thing to do? Sometimes in class we will get a student go, sir, if there's a couple who are thinking about this, what's the right thing to do? And I'll go, well, what do you think? What do others think? Have we got different opinions in the room? So they can view different perspectives and then make informed decisions on the basis of those perspectives. It's important as well to recognise head and heart. So, how do you think they will think about this? What do you think they will think about this? And how do you think that will make them feel? Or how do you feel about this? What do you think is the right thing? What does this issue make you feel about? Also, point people to accurate sources of information. We do. And we will often ask the question and go, where can you find out more about this? Where can you make yourself more informed? And it's really important as well to look at supporting and helping your child. So who do you think can help? Asking that question is great. And this last question I think is so powerful. What can I do to help? Showing that willingness to support your child, but not just kind of offering solutions, but asking them what help they need. They may not know, but it can be so reassuring to know that your intent is there to support them and to help them. Another important aspect is be realistic. Honesty and integrity matters in your responses. It is so important. If you don't know, say you don't know, and that's okay. We do the same. Occasionally, we've been doing this a long while, and we've got a lot of experience, and we've heard almost all the questions that are possible. But our world is changing. So occasionally our students do come up with something that throws us a curveball, and we'll turn around and go, do you know what? I'm not sure. Or I think I know the answer, but I'm going to double check because I want to give you accurate information. And that acknowledgement, just being honest about that, is a really powerful thing that will help support your child no end. And it's okay to disagree. You may disagree with your child's viewpoint, and that's perfectly acceptable. In fact, students can often learn an awful lot from differing opinions. We encourage people to share different views. And if you disagree, you disagree. That's okay. It is important to explain calmly and reasonably why you may disagree, and also respect that your child may have different opinions and different feelings. And it might actually be worth, again, going back to those questions and going, well, why do you think that? Or why do you think my view is different from your view on this? And exploring that in questions is a really powerful thing. But be honest, be yourself. That is, what your children need, and what is going to be the most effective way for you to reach them and support them. It's important to acknowledge that there are risks in sex and relationships. There are risks in real life relationships, and we know this, and we can't shelter our children from them, but we can equip them to assess those risks and support them in understanding what appropriate risks are and what are inappropriate risks, and also how to minimize risk. We've probably all experienced risks in relationships. Many of you may have at some point rather uncomfortably had to approach someone that we've kind of had a growing feelings for, and we're kind of wanting to go out with them, and but can I say anything? And we've struggled with that emotion. We've wrestled with it, and we've gone up to them at some point, finally plucked up the courage and we've taken the risk and come, would you like to go out with me sometime? And I'm sure most of you, or all of you maybe, have experienced the positives of someone going, yes, that would be absolutely wonderful, brilliant. I was hoping you would ask. You know, some of us may have experienced the negative side of that risk with, no, definitely not. You know, we take a risk with that when we seek acceptance in a relationship. We are always risking the possibility of rejection. And we need to encourage our children to understand that there are risks within relationships. There is no safety net, and they are going to have high moments where the risk pays off, and that's wonderful. And there are going to be challenges as well, and times when we hurt in relationships. What is really important is to help encourage your child to understand what healthy risks are and what unhealthy risks are. And actually, if you do really have concerns, if you have a conversation with your child and you still have concerns, there are a few things you can do about that to help you get support and to help them get support. The first thing I would say is you can contact the child's director of study in school or the college manager in school. We have an amazing pastoral team, and they are so willing to help and support not only your children, but you as well. You know, we are partners in their education. We help their learning during school time, but then the rest of the time they're in your hands and they are learning so much from you. And we highly respect the contribution you make with that. We know how important it is. And if we can support you in helping them learn and develop into responsible adults, that's a win-win situation. So our pastoral teams are there to support you. If you need their help, don't hesitate to contact them. The other thing is you might seek advice from really good sources of information. I've included the link to thinkyouknow.co.uk. It's a great resource for children. There is so much information there, and it's in working relationship with CEOP, the Child Exploitation and Online Protection Unit. The information is accurate, it's child-friendly, and it's very, very comprehensive. But what's wonderful as well is there's a bit on there for you. They've got resources on how to support your child in different conversations, and also if you've got concerns, different things that you can do to help address those concerns. And of course, if it is serious, it may be necessary to contact the police. And that's particularly the case if you're looking at issues of sexual harassment and sexual violence. But it's great as well to have that conversation with school. And if that is something that is a concern, school will help support you in that whole process as well. So remember, there's a lot of old stereotypes about relationships and sex. If you teach people about relationships and sex, they're more likely to have sex. You're just oh, I've heard everything. You're just encouraging them to do it. The evidence says everything opposite to that. The evidence says that if your child receives really effective relationships and sex education, they are far more likely to report it if there is sexual abuse happening. They are far more likely to delay the first sex that they have until they are ready. Their first sexual activity is far more likely to be consensual. They are far more likely to use contraception responsibly and use condoms responsibly. They are far more informed to do that. On an aside, condoms are about 99.6% effective, except in the first year of use, and they drop to about 85% effective. So they nearly lose 15% effectiveness in the first year. And I love the research, the way they sum this up. They drop by 15% because of user error. In other words, teaching students how to use condoms effectively will help protect people from unplanned pregnancies and help protect people from serious sexually transmitted infections. And again, as part of this, if they receive effective relationships and sex education, they're far less likely to experience unplanned pregnancy and experience sexually transmitted infections. I love the bit on the infographic there. The top 3 preferred sources about sex for young people. You'd think it was friends. You'd think it was peers. You'd think it was the internet. But it isn't. Their first call, believe it or not, is school. And that's why we take this so seriously. We are, on the front line of helping equip young people for adult life. But here's the thing. The second preferred source is you. And we are working in partnership with you. We're here to support your children, but we're also here to support you. So if we can help in any way, my email's there. Feel free to contact me. Feel free to phone me. If I can be any assistance, I will. And the other one is health professionals. We do actually get school nurses come in. We get nurses from the sexual health clinic who come in. They're fabulous in providing the information in a really non-judgmental way and highlighting how the NHS also supports students in their learning and in keeping them safe. I thought I'd also include some good resources for you. Hopefully you will find these helpful, and thank you for your patience through this. Okay. The BISH website is really, really good. This offers a lot of advice for young people, but what's really, really good is they've got lots of short videos and lots of information packets that will help you understand important issues in sex relationships today, and understand what your children are being taught as well. So a really good resources, particularly if you think about a specific issue. They probably got something on there specifically that will link into the issue that you and your child are addressing. Think You Know website, again, really encourages talking with your child about relationships, and they've got a load of video resources called Ask the Awkward, because let's face it, it's not always the easiest conversations to have in the world, and they're a great resource and a great support. For information, particularly about consent, it's really good about this. The SexWise website is great, talking about consent, giving a bit of the context on some of the legal background and why it is so important today. Brooke are a fabulous charity when it comes to addressing sexual health and well-being. And as you can see from their website, there are a whole range of very specific topics that it will help you address. I would strongly encourage just having a look through Brooke and seeing how Brooke addresses these issues for young people. And it will help you address those issues with your child as well. Again, as I say, the directors of study are always willing to help. The college managers are always willing to help. And if you at any point want to contact me to find out about what we teach, how we teach, raise any concerns, share any ideas, or are seeking advice, I am very happy to help, answer any questions that I can. And as I've encouraged you to do with your children, if I don't know the answer, I will try and find out for you in the most effective and accurate way possible. Thank you so much for your time. I hope this has been helpful. We encourage your feedback, or we're always ready to listen to you. And thank you for listening.